What's going on, everybody? Matt here again from East Coast Sabers, and today we're going to do another video review slash overview of a recently released Graflex model, and that is going to be the 89Sabers. So let's jump right into it. First thing I want to say is that 89Sabers definitely gets a 10 out of 10 for presentation. The box that this thing comes in is very well done. You have the 89Sabers Graflex kit logo, Graflex stamping on the box. Now it should be noted that the stamping, which has been corrected in upcoming versions, features the Roman Empire stamping that the owner of 89Sabers mistakenly used the Roman Empire stamping. So that has been corrected. Other people have pointed that out in the past, but for upcoming releases it is being taken care of. So these sabers are finally starting to ship after a few delays to get them more perfect. There was a couple flaws, but they're finally shipping. So I will definitely give a 10 out of 10 for the packaging, because the packaging is very well done. It's a nice solid box. So we'll just pull the top off. Even the top of the box has a nice layer of thick foam glued to the inside of it. Very nice. And inside, the saber itself comes nicely packed in this pre-cut foam. Of course, you have the saber itself. I'll just do a close-up of that real quick. And in this video, we're going to go over an overview of the external of the saber, the internal of the saber, my thoughts and opinions on it, and I will also do a breakdown of how this thing actually comes apart, because it is kind of tricky compared to other Graflex models. We'll put that off to the side. And also in the box, you have two bags, much like the 2.0. This one being the Empire Strikes Back / The Force Awakens. Comes with your extra red button, the 6 grips, the D-ring, clamp cards. Actually get 2 clamp cards, and we'll go over everything in the bags in a little bit. And of course you have your A New Hope bag as well. So we'll put the box off to the side. And now we'll focus back on the saber. And let me zoom in a little bit here. Alright, now my initial opinion and thoughts are that the saber is very well done. It does have things that I don't really understand the thought process behind. I don't necessarily agree with it, but there's a lot of things that are very well done compared to other manufacturers that are out there. So again, like all my reviews, we'll start at the emitter and we'll just work our way down. So starting at the emitter, let's talk about the shape of it. And the shape of the emitter, it has a decent curve. I'm not sure, I don't think it quite matches a vintage perfectly. I think this, as most of them are, this top corner here is still rather shallow. Could be a little bit deeper, but it's not terrible. I've certainly seen worse. It does come with the accurate, if we can focus on that, it does have the accurate smooth head rivet style screw. It is a screw, it's not actually a rivet, and we'll go over that a little more in just a moment. The bunny ears are a nice finish on them. They're not quite as shiny as a vintage. They more match the rest of the finish of the hilt. They're a duller, they're not really brushed, as you can see. It's not really a brushed finish, it's more of just a pure satin finish, which doesn't look bad. It's very clean, that's for sure. There's no blemishes or anything in the band. And the bunny ears themselves are nicely done. There's no edge cuts around the top of the bunny ears, and there's also no edge cuts on the inside of the emitter. The whole cut is very smooth, very clean, and I like that. The inside doesn't have any stains on it. It's very well plated. Moving down, the red button is your typical red button. It is a functional button which you can unscrew, and it features the same style button that the 2.0 has, but the tactile switch is actually held in with a retaining ring, which is rather nice. So you do still have that tactile feel, but the button stays in. Now this can be kind of a pain when you're doing the install, because you're going to have to pop this circlip out in order to get the switch out, so that you can solder to it and then kind of figure out a way to thread the switch in. I haven't really thought about how that's going to work yet, because if you solder to the switch and have it outside of the saber, solder to it, and then you go to thread the switch in, you're going to be twisting your wires up like crazy, and I'm not personally not really a fan of that. I think that could have been better designed, but as I said, I have yet to do an actual install on one of these, so maybe there is a way around it that I'm just not seeing at first glance. Because even if you pull the circlip out, there we go, even if you pull that circlip out and solder to it, you can then put the switch back in and pop the circlip back in, and then you can kind of tuck your wires in, I guess, but it's still going to spin a bit when you thread the switch housing back in. So that was kind of a interesting design choice that I'm not quite sure how that's going to work out quite yet. I can say that the buttons thread in very nicely. They thread in very smoothly. I got that one a little cockeyed. But the threading on them is very nice. It's not, some of the 2.0s, the threading is very, very stiff, and it's hard to get the buttons and the glass eyes out. But this one, I can say that they, at least for this one, they came right out. And they go right back in. Same for the glass eye. The threading on it is very nice. It is a see-through glass eye. It does actually have a spring attached to it. Now again, this is an interesting design choice, because if you look on the inside, you actually have the solid blade holder with a threaded stud hole if you wanted to use either, well, I think the Graflex shop is the only one that currently sells the threaded style glass eye or red button retention screws. So you do have the option for that. Currently, this emitter screw is your blade retention. If you look inside, which that's difficult to see, let me get a little light. There you go. You can see the emitter screw protrudes, so I'm assuming that is meant to be blade retention, your flathead emitter screw, but you do have the possibility, if you want to get one of the retention screws from the Graflex shop, you can use that. So it comes with this spring-loaded one, which has done just a little bit of paint, or I suppose it's probably anodizing removal. You can see just the silver line from where the spring has rubbed across it. Not really a big deal, since you're never going to see it. And that hole does allow, I'm sure, for some shine through. I don't think it's going to be anything significant, but it will have something. Moving down again, the beer tab is flat. It's not a stepped beer tab like the 2.0 has. So that's nice. The finish on it's not bad. It's certainly not chromed. It's not the super flat, dull gray that vintages have, but it's definitely a sturdy material. I'm going to assume it's some form of stainless. And same with the slide switch plate. It's certainly not chrome. And also, unlike the 2.0, this is an actual functioning slide switch. 2.0 is more of just a decorative little plate cover. This is definitely a spring-loaded switch, and it is spring-loaded, and the switch does come pre-installed, and we'll go over all of that in just a little bit. The finish on it itself is pretty nice. The only problems that I really have with it are right up at the emitter, and if you listen to the way my fingernail drags across it, you can hear that that's very smooth. And then up right at the emitter, it's a little rougher, and you can see it's kind of like a stained area right at the emitter where I don't know if the plating didn't adhere properly or if it got scuffed during assembly. I'm not really sure, but you can kind of see where it works its way and gets thicker towards the middle and then gets thinner again as it goes down the curve. That's really the only plating issue I've noticed on this. It's very clean. It's a nice brushed, almost chromish in the right light, so I'm not sure if he actually chromed these or if they are the nickel plating like a lot of replicas use. The clamps are very well done. The clamps, this clamp at least has 0 blemishes, nothing up in the clamp braces. The whole finish all the way around is very even, very concentric. The stamping for the letters is nice and deep. It's rather wide, meaning that the individual letters themselves have kind of a wide, it's kind of like they put a bold print on it, but it's a nice deep stamping. The lines I'm especially a fan of because they're nice and deep and they're clean. They look like they've been stamped as well and not etched like some of the other replicas do. So there are no problems with thin lines or anything like that. They're very well pronounced. The only thing I will say about the clamp that I'm confused about is you look at the alignment of the G and it has pretty proper alignment with the notches for the upper and lower. It may sit in just a little bit, but it's not terrible. But if you look as we go along, all of a sudden you get to the other side and the X is way past where it's supposed to be. It's supposed to line up with here, and all of a sudden the X is much further this way than it's supposed to be. I'm not really sure how that happened. I don't know if the lettering between, the spacing between the letters suddenly gets wider, or if the whole stamp was simply cocked off to the side a little bit when it was stamped flat. Because I'm assuming that the lettering is done when the stamp is flat and then they simply shape it. So it looks like the stamping wasn't perfectly centered on the piece. But other than that, the clamp is very well done. No blemishes or anything like that. Looks very nice. The lower half, the finishing matches the upper and the clamp very well. No blemishes or thin plating or anything to speak of in that respect. And the lowers do come stamped, but they also come pre-drilled for sound holes and mounting holes. You have your large hole for your A New Hope D-ring, and you have your 2 smaller ones for your Empire Strikes Back / the Force Awakens Cobalt D-ring. And the rest of them are sound vent holes. Now, as much as I can understand the need for the pre-drilled sound holes, because some people don't have the means to drill them out themselves, it's also kind of a hindrance in my opinion, because if you're doing the A New Hope, there are ways to hide the sound vents other than massive holes that you can now see. So if you're going for that look, now you kind of have no choice but to stare at these big open holes that look kind of awkward. So that was an interesting choice as well. One that I'm not sure I agree with, but it's not terrible. I think most people build Force Awakens Graflexes out of them, so they'll all be covered anyway by the Cobalt. One thing that I did want to touch on that I forgot when I was up talking about the upper half is the inner core. It does feature the accurate lip around the front. The inner core is actually 1-inch inner core, whereas if you look down, which again with the lighting is difficult, but it is a 1-inch bore straight through. The bunny ears have these reduced sized nubs, if my camera will focus on it. They have the nubs on the inside of the bunny ears are reduced to allow the 1-inch blade to fit in there better without distorting the ears as much. And as you'll see, the sink pin pockets or sockets, whatever you want to call them, are shallower than on a vintage, and they do come with short pins. And it does come with an entire sink pin strip and contact strip, excuse me, that goes all the way across, much like a vintage, certain vintages and the ones that KR-Saber sells. It does go all the way across. Of course, it has been modified for this saber being a shorter socket, so if you get a vintage one, it probably won't fit because the sockets aren't as deep. It does have the lines scribed inside of it to make it look like it is a two-piece design. In fact, it does not split right there like a vintage, and there are no metallic pieces inside these two rectangular holes. That's just for appearance. So overall on the outside, I like it. It's definitely clean. I like the way that the buttons thread in. All the threading feels very nice. The finish on it's nice, like I said, except for this one little area at the tip of the emitter. The buttons press nicely. The spring-loaded button works very well. The clamp is nice. The finish is nice. I definitely like the smooth cut for the emitter. That's a nice feature. And the stamping on the bottom is well done. Again, it is the improper stamping because he mistakenly used a stamping with the Roman Empire stamp trademark on there. But overall, the finish on it is very well done. No major problems, except, as I said, just up at the emitter. But that could just be with this one. That's not an indication that they're all like that. So now that we've gone over the outside, let's go over the inside, and I will give you a demo on how to disassemble, and probably even a demo on how to reassemble, since reassembly is slightly more complicated. So let's go over that now. Alright, so let's jump right into the disassembly of this hilt, and for this you are going to need some tools. You're going to need a medium size, or I shouldn't say a medium size, this is a small, just a pocket flat blade screwdriver. You're going to want an Allen key. This one is a 1.5 millimeter, so it is pretty small. It's the smallest one that I had in my cheap kit. I got a kit just at Home Depot that I use for home, and if you look, it is a 1.5 millimeter that is missing. You're going to need a smaller screwdriver, also a flat blade. I got this out of a watch repair kit. And you're going to need a tool for your brass sink pin removal. This is the one I got from the Graflex shop. Hasn't let me down yet. As I've said before, you can use a ink cartridge out of a pen. You just heat it up, let it cool around the pin, and you have yourself a cheap little tool. Or you can get the Graflex shop, or you can get a socket. I can't remember the exact size of the hex head on the pins. So, to disassemble, and we'll go over the inside as we're doing this, you simply open the clamp, push in a little bit, twist the lower in a counterclockwise, and the lower will slide out. We'll put that off to the side. And then you can also push in, twist counterclockwise, and remove the clamp from the upper. Now the 89Sabers does come with a shell for a crystal chamber. Now I can't remember if they all come with the shell or if that is an option you can get. And it simply unthreads from the inner core. We'll set that aside for right now. So as you can see, there just has some threads on the inside, and it has the 89Sabers particular own design on it. Certainly an interesting take. And of course you can design your own crystal chamber to go inside. You have little viewing windows to view the crystal through. Just a nice feature for those that want to maybe build their own chamber using chassis discs from the custom saber shop, but don't have the machining ability to machine your own outer metal shell. So that's an interesting idea, kind of a cool concept. And then the upper is the most difficult part to disassemble. It is a two-piece inner. Surprisingly, I thought it was going to be all one piece, but as you can see, there is a split inside, and it does come apart in two pieces. You can also see, if I get my light back again, down inside you have that metal, or that thing hanging down in the middle of it, and that is actually the contacts for the slide switch, and I'll show you that in just a little bit. So I don't know how that's going to work with internal chassis, because you're going to hit that, and if it's solid round, you're not going to be able to push anything past that. So that will be interesting for chassis designers to try and figure a workaround for. But that also, I believe we should be able to grab it, and it just unscrews. Now I have noticed that the ears right here, not the bunny ears, but these two ears that hang over, they are rather tight and they do push in a little bit, causing some friction on the chassis, so you may need to just put some pressure from the outside or from the inside and try and bend those outward a little bit. But looking at the lower half of the inner core, it's simply just a piece of anodized aluminum with multiple wire channels machined all the way around. I'm assuming that is so that no matter what position the lower piece threads onto the upper, you have a wire channel somewhere that you can run wires back to, which allows for easier chassis installation. You don't have to worry about always having the wires come out in a certain place. You can have wires come out anywhere. As you can see, this is a step. It is step down, so you can hide wires along this diameter until you find your closest wire passage, which then has a hole that leads to the inside. So again, kind of an interesting design. Why this wasn't kept as a whole one-piece inner, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe we'll find out as we go along. So for the rest of the upper, as you can see, there is the back plate of the switch, and those four little arms that you see are for the switch itself. And if you look, if my camera will focus, I don't know if it will, but you will see, let me use my screwdriver, that these two little tabs, these two little holes here and here, those are what you will solder your wires to for your auxiliary switch. And we'll get a better look at that when we pull the rest of the inner core out. So for now, you're going to want to remove your glass eye. Put that off to the side. You can remove your red button. Put that off to the side. And you can go ahead and remove your sync pins. Okay, once all the pins are removed, you can now loosen your rear tab screw. Actually, you know what, before you do that, one of the things that I did want to mention about the screw for the bunny ears is that if you look on the back side, and it's hard with the camera in the way, let me see if I can zoom in here. The back side of the threaded rivet is actually slotted, which is one thing that I really like about this idea, because the threaded rivet is very nice because it's accurate with the smooth head, but sometimes those can be a pain to thread in and get tight. The slot on the back makes that easy. So with your small screwdriver, you can simply line it up with the slot, and then you can unthread it from the back side. So you don't have to worry about getting plier marks or anything on the head of your rivet. And then it simply pushes out the front, just like that. You can put that off to the side. Let me zoom back out again. And then, as always, just push your bunny ears down, pinch them together just a little bit to get them to clear the shroud. Being careful not to pinch them together so much that your spacer falls out, because that will happen if you pinch the bunny ears. The spacer falls right out the middle. So once we have the bunny ears removed, you will notice, if this will focus and with proper lighting, there are two screws, one there and one over there, that hold the lip onto the rest of the inner core. So the whole inner core is actually three pieces. You have the lip, you have the complete upper, and you have the lower piece, which we already took off. And this is where the 1.5 millimeter Allen key comes in handy, because they just unscrew. If you can see that, there we go. And there's just a short little tapered Allen screw. There we go. It'll come right off, and then your lip comes right off. Again, interesting design. So now we have the rest of the upper. So what we can do now is we can loosen the emitter screw. I don't really like to actually take it all the way out just yet. Just loosen it, and once that's loose, it will allow you to have a little bit more freedom in removing the the beer tab screw. And it is a screw, it's not a rivet, and you actually need to loosen the whole beer tab in order to unthread it. Now it's not all one piece. It is a three-piece design with the washer, but it kind of locks itself into the beer tab pretty well. There we go. And allows it to all spin as one unit, which is pretty nice. I actually like that. So we can put that off to the side. And now we can remove the emitter screw. Now, I've seen a lot of people ask how to get the slide switch out, because it is firmly locked in place. And the trick to that is, once you've done all of this, you're going to want to slide the inner core back. So as you can see, I'm sliding it down inside the saber, and then you can just simply pull the slide switch out, which, if we take a look at that, it is the plate with the square rivet style that goes through it with a hole through it. So you have your plate, and a lot of people have complained that this plate comes bent, and I believe that that's actually a good thing, because if it wasn't bent and if it was straight, when you put pressure on the switch to use it, it's going to wear the plating off, which we've seen on vintages and several replicas. So the fact that it's bent just a little bit up keeps it off the metal and will keep the plating looking a lot better. So that's all that makes up your slide switch. It's just a piece of square stock with a hole drilled in it, and if we push the inner core back up, you can see there's actually a metal. Now I can actually, at this point, you can actually push it right out, making sure that your sink pin tabs aren't getting caught on the inside of the shroud. There we go. You can actually slide it right out, and that just fell back in. And then you can pull this right out the top. This part comes right off. You can put that off to the side, and then your inner core comes right out, and you now have your empty shell, which we can put off to the side. And this is the upper half of the inner core. You have your wire passage for your red button, where your glass eye goes, and this is the assembly for the slide switch. You have this little plunger assembly which pushes down on the momentary switch. So as you can see, here's that white piece that hangs down from inside. And it is screwed on to the inner core, so you can simply remove it. I believe that is the same, yep, it's the same 1.5 millimeter screw to remove that, if you ever need to. But it's actually kind of a fascinating design of having this plunger here that pushes down on a switch deeper down inside the hilt. So what you're doing when you remove the shroud is your switch sits on, and the pin you see right at the end here sits inside this hole, and the square shoulder pushes against the larger diameter of the shoulder when you push the switch, which causes the switch to be pressed. So all you're doing when you pull the inner core down in the shroud is giving your switch enough room to stay where it is, ride in that channel a little bit, and then simply be free of that pin. So it's actually quite an ingenious little design, and I kind of like it. I don't like the fact that it hangs down into the inner core, making chassis installation possibly a little more tricky, but the idea itself is quite interesting. So that, at that point, we have everything disassembled, so that is your complete disassembly of the 89Sabers Graflex. And like I said, there are quite a few pieces to keep track of with this one. It's not as simple as some of the vintages. I'll just lay out all the pieces here. There are quite a few little screws and odds and ends. That shouldn't be too intimidating for those of you that are used to working on sabers. This is really shouldn't be anything surprising or new or anything like that. So yeah, that is it. That is all of the parts for the 89Sabers Graflex. So if we take a look at the inner core here, and we thread the two halves together, as I said, there is a step here, so all of your wiring that comes down can ride in this recessed channel all the way around until you find the wire channel that you want to use to drop it down inside and into your chassis system, whether you design something, whether you use something that somebody else designs, it's up to you. But I'm just trying to find a reason why it was two-piece, and the only thing I can come up with is to gain access to the screws to mount this switch, because with that in place, obviously you can't get access to the screws. You need to unscrew that in order to get to those, and to properly solder to that. And as always, you should use white lithium grease. These come pretty well greased and oiled. There's a light layer of film on these, but you should always use some white lithium grease on on your threads to keep them from seizing, keep them from cross-threading, or help prevent cross-threading. It won't be a positive thing. But yeah, interesting design. So now that we've taken it apart, let me just show you how it goes back together. And like I said, going back together is a little bit trickier, but I will walk you through it step by step. All right, going back together, the first thing you're going to want is obviously your upper half of the inner core. And let me zoom in just a little bit here. So you're going to want to get the upper half, and you're going to want your shell. Now, I've done this a couple times as a dry run to make sure that I had it down pretty well, but if I make a mistake and I have to go back, please excuse me. I too am still trying to master this one. So, that being said, what you're going to want to do first, I believe, is line up your sink pins, or your sink pin tab, and that should slide right in. Yep, there you go. And then, just like when we removed it, the first thing you're going to want to do is pull it back and drop in your side switch assembly with the little punch mark facing forward. And this part can be a little tricky, getting it in place, and you kind of got to hold it away from the saber just a little bit as you slide the upper half back into place. And I think that was it, because if you push it in too far, the pin inside won't properly align with the hole, and it will just push on the bar, keeping it from working. But if we line this up like it's supposed to be, and we kind of push this into position, I'm not sure if I got this right or not. That looks like it's pretty well in place. Yep, and we still have spring function. You will know if it's not in the proper place, because when you push it up to line the holes up with everything, you will feel spring resistance and the switch won't be able to move. But right now, if I hold the inner core in place and use the switch, that's still spring functions, so I know that's good. The switch itself is captured, it's not falling out, so that's good. So just make sure that your sink pin tabs are depressed enough to sit inside the shell. And what I'm going to do now is simply loosely install the emitter screw to keep everything from moving around and falling out. I'm not going to tighten it at this time, it's just to keep everything in place and to keep it from falling around. So while this is all loose, I'm actually going to install my two front sink pins to capture my sink pin tab in position, because I've noticed that that does like to move around a little bit, and it's a lot easier to get these in while this is still loose and able to move. Whoops. If it stays in the tool, that works a lot better. So I'm trying to do this through the camera and it's not working, so please bear with me. Okay, I've got both of those installed. They were a little bit tricky, they fought me a little bit, but they are in, and now our plate is not going anywhere. So now, before we put the bunny ears back in, we need to get our lip reinstalled, because once the bunny ears are in, you don't really have great access to those screws. So as you can see, let me just show you this, if it'll focus. There we go. As you can see, the lip does have the edge to it, which matches the contour of the emitter itself, so it can really only go on one way. And it goes with the, if you look at the bottom side here, it's very dull and it has a sharper edge, whereas the top side is more glossy and it has that curved edge that goes in. So you just want the curved edge up and line it up so that the taper matches. And it just sits just like that. And then get your 1.5 millimeter Allen key again. And simply drop it into place. Thread it in. Now I don't tighten these because you want, well, you shouldn't tighten the first one before you get the second one started, because it will, if the holes aren't properly aligned, it will make it incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to make the second one go in straight. So you want to keep the first one looser so you can still have a little bit of free play. When you install the second one. And then once they're both in, then you can tighten them both down. And now you have your lip installed. Now at this point, if you want to install your bunny ears, you can go ahead and do that. Now as I said, be careful not to pinch them and hold them anything but straight up, or else the threaded spacer inside will fall out. So simply just hold it nice and upright with the, I should make note of that, if you look, as you can see, this side of the spacer is threaded while this side is not. So you want the threaded end facing the rear of the saber. So hold it nice and level, pinch the bunny ears just enough to get them to start to go through, and then once they're through, just push them up into place. Make sure the hole is aligned, and then you can drop your stud down in, and as you can see, once we have it out, the stud is notched on the end for the screwdriver, and that is something that I absolutely love, because installing these smooth-headed screws is a pain in the ass, because you always end up sometimes having to grab it with a pair of pliers, and it scratches stuff, and I really hate that. So just drop it in until it hits the threads and can't go anymore. And then this is easy to do with the bunny ear, with the beer tab removed, and simply use your screw to reach through. Try not to push it back out. Thread that in. And then once it catches, there we go. Now at this point, it is almost like a reverse thread, so you have to go counterclockwise to thread it in, and you have to go clockwise to thread it out from the back side. And then just tighten it down. It's nice and tight, it's not going anywhere. And your bunny ears are now in place. Very simple. So as I said, keep the emitter screw loose, and that is so that you can still maintain a looser inner core, because you want that a little loose when you go to install your beer tab. Make sure the washer's on there, and thread the beer tab screw in. This beer tab bent a little bit. Thread it in. Once it's started, it should just go in pretty well. And yep, see, I ran into a small problem doing this. As I said, I worked with this a couple times, still getting the system down. So it turns out that even though the emitter screw is loose, putting the lip on before the beer tab, I keep doing that, it puts too much pressure on the inner core and kind of locks it in place and keeps it from moving. So all we're going to do is, actually, you know what, I think I may be able to get down here just enough just to loosen the screws on the lip to give us just a little bit of play and movement. Yeah, see, okay, now the inner core is able to move a little bit better, and that should allow us to, yep, Now we can thread the beer tab screw in much tighter. It's actually too tight. Keep it like that. And then like the 2.0, just kind of get it to a position where it's nice and use the beer tab itself to spin it the rest of the way around. And you may need to play with it a little bit to find that perfect alignment. And I'm just going to pop this out a little bit. And as I said, the beer tab screw is actually rather tight in the beer tab itself, which can cause a little bit of friction. There. I actually kind of like that. It's threaded in pretty well. And once that is in, then we can go back and we can retighten the screws to hold the lip on. And I'm just going down right beside the bunny ears. Just like that. Those are nice and tight. And now once those are tight, you can tighten your emitter screw. And that locks everything down. Keeps it all in place. It puts extra tension on your beer tab screw to keep that in place. Then you can install your red button. There we go. Which, as I said, does screw in very nicely. You can install your glass eye. Okay, and the last thing is your last two sink pins, which we'll just install those real quick. Alright, and once those are tight, you can take your lower half of your inner core, slide it inside, thread that in, thread your chassis shell, if you have one, onto that. Let me zoom back out here a little bit. Install the clamp onto the upper. Install the lower into the clamp. Lock it all down. And you have your reassembled 89Sabers Graflex. Not too bad of a disassembly and reassembly. A few more pieces, especially in the upper half, than most Graflexes have, but overall not bad. I do like the slide switch assembly. I don't care for the fact that it does protrude inside the inner core. I think that may make it a little difficult for chassis installers, but we'll see what they come up with. Maybe you sink the LED module right up against it and then the chassis comes right up to the top or to the other side of it, and you have plenty of room. Who knows? We'll see what Goth3D Designs and other chassis installers can come up with for it, if they take the time to design anything at all. But overall, I think it's a good replica. I think it has a few flaws, like the little bit of plating issue on the emitter, which I'm sure will be taken care of. Overall, the finish on it, like I said, is very nicely done. The fact that it's 1 inch is nice for a lot of people. They prefer a 1 inch blade. A lot of people have said that this will be good for dueling, and I'm not sure that I can agree with that, because even though it uses the threaded solid inner core, the problem that I have with dueling with a Graflex, whether it be a vintage or a replica, is the fact that the upper and lower halves are held together with the clamp. Now, the reason that the 2.0 is pretty good for dueling is because the lower half actually threads onto the inner core, making it very solid, and the clamp is basically there just for decoration. But even in this configuration, even in the 89Sabers, the clamp still acts as the only means of securing the upper and lower halves together. Now, you do have this solid inner core, so in theory they shouldn't be able to flex too much in order to break. I still obviously can't guarantee that because I haven't done any durability testing or anything like that with it. It's certainly better than a vintage or a replica or anything like that that doesn't have a solid inner core. If you have a vintage or anything with a solid inner core, again, it's better than hollow, but it's still not as good as the 2.0 where it's completely threaded and completely solid. So I can't fully give my recommendation that you go and do heavy dueling with this. I think the 1-inch blade is nice for light. It's good for the Force Awakens because it's more of an accurate thickness. But overall, having not being able to test this yet for dueling purposes, I can't tell you how it will hold up. If you're going to duel with it, I'd say go light at first and see what it can take, and feel free to let me know how heavy a dueling you can do with it. I mean, due to the fact that it's solid all the way through, like I said, you don't get a lot of flex, but I can't say that it's impossible for the clamp to fail and for something to bend, something to snap, and for it to break. So just be gentle with it at first. But overall, not a bad replica. It does have its a few little questionable things, like the multi-piece inner core, which like I said, I think is because of the slide switch assembly. But overall, not bad. I hope that they do fix the stamping issue with the stamping kind of offset on the clamp itself, but not a big deal. Overall, I'd give this one a 7.5 out of 10. It's not bad. It definitely has a nice finish. The presentation, the box that comes in, is very well done. Definitely a redesign of the 2.0. Definitely a step up, I think, in the right direction. Still some things that should be tweaked, in my personal opinion. That doesn't really account for much anyway. So I can definitely recommend this if you want something a little more accurate than a 2.0 because it doesn't have the holes. Like I said, this kind of inhibits a lot, but we'll see what happens with people that do A New Hope. And yeah, overall, not a bad saber at all. 89Sabers did a very decent job with this one. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments or message me through my business page on Facebook at East Coast Sabers. And stay tuned for more videos. I think I still have a Maker Prop Studio stainless steel Graflex coming at some point whenever the next batch is ready to ship. So keep an eye out for that one, though I can't say exactly when that will be. But again, any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to leave them in the comments section below or follow me on Facebook. So until next time, everybody, thank you for watching, and may the Force be with you.